It was early morning in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. The city was just waking up, cars humming along wet asphalt, a faint mist clinging to the street lamps. Inside the glass front entrance of St. Andrew's Medical Center, the air was cool and smelled faintly of antiseptic and brewed coffee. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss, and in stepped Miles Harper, a tall, broad-shouldered African-American man in his late 30s. His military jacket, a little faded at the seams, bore the patch of the 82nd Airborne Division. He walked with a visible limp, every step making his face tighten just slightly. In his right hand, he held a folder pressed to his side. In his left, he gripped a worn wooden cane. As he crossed the lobby, the sound of his cane clicking against the tile echoed, catching the attention of the receptionist, a white woman in her 40s, with perfectly straight blonde hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. She gave him a quick glance, then immediately dropped her eyes back to her computer screen. Miles approached the desk, resting his cane against the counter. His voice was deep, calm, but carried an undertone of strain. "Morning, ma'am. My knee's acting up again. Old injury. I don't have an appointment, but the pain's getting bad. I was hoping someone could take a look today." The receptionist typed something on her keyboard without looking up. Her tone was polite but distant, the kind of politeness that builds a wall rather than a bridge. "Without an appointment, you'll have to wait. We're already backed up. Go ahead and take a seat at the end of the waiting area. Someone will call you eventually." Her eyes flicked toward a clipboard with forms, but she didn't hand it to him. Miles glanced over his shoulder at the "We Serve Everyone" sign mounted proudly on the wall behind him. The words, printed in bold blue letters, felt almost like a taunt. He gave a slow nod, his jaw tightening slightly, and turned toward the waiting area. Each step was careful, deliberate. As he walked, a man in a business suit, white mid-40s, approached the desk behind him. The receptionist's voice suddenly became warmer, lighter. "Good morning, Mr. Callahan. How's your wife doing?" "Oh, I'll get you in right away." Miles heard it but didn't stop. He lowered himself into a stiff vinyl chair in the far corner. The cushion hissed as it compressed beneath his weight. He set his cane across his lap and exhaled slowly. Around him the clock ticked, the phone rang, and the intercom announced names that weren't his. The camera lingers on him, a solitary figure in a crowded room, while the world moves briskly for everyone else. A nurse finally appears at the edge of the waiting room and calls Miles's name, clipped and efficient. He rises, steadying himself, and follows her down a corridor that smells sharper than the lobby. The antiseptic stronger, the fluorescent lights buzzing with a faint, insect-like hum. On the walls, framed posters of joint anatomy, cheerful stock photos of smiling families, a plaque listing hospital donors. His last name sits in his throat like a stone. They reach an exam room. The nurse gestures in without meeting his eyes. Paper crinkles under him as he sits on the exam table. The room is cold. A vent above breathes mechanically. A digital thermometer dock blinks. A blood pressure cuff hangs limp, and a computer monitor loops a screensaver with a hospital logo. On a side shelf, a jar of wooden tongue depressors. Everything is tidy, almost impersonal enough to feel hostile. He waits. The clock hand climbs a minute, then another. Footsteps pass the door. Voices come and go. A burst of laughter from somewhere down the hall, then silence again. He studies the laminated emergency procedures chart, then the ceiling tile grid, counting them to keep the impatience from chewing into his composure. The door opens. In strides Dr. Charles Rivers, white early 50s, immaculate white coat, narrow tie and a conservative stripe. He doesn't sit. He stands with one hand on the mouse and the other already reaching for the keyboard. His gaze sweeps over Miles quickly, not quite resting anywhere. He logs in, the screen wakes, and data windows multiply like panes of glass. Name, age, insurance provider, primary care physician. The doctor clicks through the fields as if checking boxes were the real examination. His voice is flat, brisk, practiced. "Reason for visit?" "Knee pain," Miles answers. "Old service injury. It's worse the last few weeks. Hard to walk this morning." The doctor nods in a way that doesn't signal understanding so much as acknowledgement that sound occurred. He glances at the chart again, then at the clock on the wall, as if the minute hand had more to tell him than the patient sitting 3 feet away. He picks up a pen light doesn't use it, sets it down. Do you have a scheduled appointment today? He asks. No, Miles says. Came in as a walk-in. The pain spiked overnight. A small exhale from the doctor. Not quite a sigh. More like air escaping a valve. We're booked for procedures. Walk-ins are meant to be triaged downstairs. Did triage send you here? I was told to wait. Then they called me. Another glance to the screen. Click. Click. The room fills with the sterile tap of a keyboard. The doctor's tone cools another few degrees. We have protocols. Orthopedics is backed up. If you're a veteran, you should be using the VA clinic for non-emergent issues. I do, Miles says, and I have insurance. Right now I need help with the pain and to make sure nothing's torn. The doctor's mouth flattens. He finally steps closer, but it's a half step, enough to suggest an exam is imminent, not enough to become one. This isn't emergent. We can't divert or resources for a chronic complaint, he says, and I don't see a referral. I'm not asking for an or, Miles replies evenly. I'm asking for an exam, imaging if it's indicated. Something to get me through the day without making it worse. The doctor straightens, a faint edge of irritation sharpening his voice. Imaging requires authorization. Scheduling requires availability. Availability requires an appointment. You're here without one. The correct pathway is to follow up with primary care or the VA and return with a referral. That way you're not, he searches for the word, lands on a clinical euphemism. Disrupting the flow. The word hangs in the room like a draft. Miles watches the doctor's face, the guarded eyes, the practiced way he keeps his hands to himself, avoiding even the lightest touch that would count as care. The gulf between them is measured not in feet, but in posture. I can wait for imaging if that's the hurdle, Miles says, voice steady. But you can examine the knee now. Range of motion, palpation, basic tests. You could tell me if you suspect a meniscus issue or something else. The doctor glances at the clock again, then at the door, already half turned toward leaving. We don't have time today. I have pre-ops lining up and clinic block is over. It's more appropriate to redirect you. Redirect me where I already came from? Miles asks. The question is soft, but it lands with weight. A shadow passes over the doctor's expression, something like impatience disguised as policy. He reaches for the door handle. Look, I'm not trying to be difficult. This isn't personal. We just can't see everyone who walks in without the right paperwork. Please check in with the front desk, and they'll provide information for the VA clinic. Next. The last word is quiet but definitive, a period at the end of a sentence that hasn't earned one. The door opens. The hallway noise washes in for a second. Rolling carts, distant pages, the clipped rhythm of a hospital that prides itself on efficiency. Miles sits very still. The paper under him crackles as he shifts his weight. He feels the familiar heat behind the sternum, the kind that comes when a door closes just as you reach it. He thinks about mornings in a different uniform, about learning to breathe through pain and through silence. He looks at the doctor's name stitched in blue above the breast pocket, then at the hand still on the door, already moving him out of the frame. Understood, Miles says, each syllable measured. He slides off the table, fixes his jacket, and gathers his folder. The computer screen goes dark again, its screensaver blooming in corporate blues, as if the room had never been occupied. In the hallway, a security guard glances over, expression unreadable. Miles steps past him and back toward the waiting area. Behind him, the door to the exam room snicks shut, precise, final, like a drawer closing on a file that will not be read today. Miles emerges from the exam wing into the main corridor, the transition abrupt, from the antiseptic chill of the treatment rooms to the warmer, noisier heart of the hospital. The lighting shifts. Here, daylight pushes through wide windows, casting pale stripes across the polished floor. The hallway is alive with movement. Visitors carry bouquets in cellophane that rustles with each step. A janitor pushes a cart stacked with neatly folded linens. Two orderlies wheel a gurney past, the rubber tires making a soft hiss against the tile. But as Miles moves toward the lobby, his presence seems to ripple through the space in quieter, more invisible ways. The way eyes glance, linger, and then look away. He returns to the waiting area. The vinyl chairs are arranged in neat rows, the kind you can sit in for hours without finding a comfortable position. He takes the same corner seat, placing his folder across his knees. The front desk is just a few yards away, but it feels further now, as though the invisible distance between him and it has lengthened. From his seat, he can hear fragments of conversations carried on low voices, the intimate kind that people have when they think the person they're talking about isn't listening. Two women sit diagonally across from him. One wears a floral blouse, the other a cardigan and a string of pearls. They lean close, their faces tilted toward each other, their words a thread of sound that occasionally lifts just high enough to catch. "Always without an appointment," the one in the cardigan murmurs. The other answers, eyes flicking toward Miles for a moment before returning to her companion. "They expect special treatment," the first one adds, her tone not angry but certain, like she's stating a self-evident truth. The words are low, but they land like grit on glass. Miles keeps his gaze on the floor tiles, following the faint marbling pattern as though it might lead somewhere else entirely. His hands rest lightly on the folder, the pressure controlled, deliberate. The discipline of not showing a reaction where one is expected. A shadow moves into his periphery. A nurse, tall, red-haired, skin pale against the navy scrubs, is crossing the lobby. Her name badge swings slightly as she walks. EmilYk. She slows when she sees him. Her eyes move from his posture to the subtle stiffness in his leg. Then they shift to the two women still whispering, still stealing quick sidelong glances in his direction. Emily hesitates for half a breath, then changes course toward him. She crouches slightly so she's not towering over him, her voice pitched low enough to be private. "You doing okay?" she asks. "I've had better mornings," Miles says, his tone even but edged with the kind of honesty that can't quite be smoothed over. Her gaze flicks to the ice machine by the wall. "Hold on." She steps away, disappears into a small alcove, and returns with a clear plastic bag filled with crushed ice, condensation already starting to bead. In her other hand, a bottle of water. She sets both on the small side table next to him. "Here," she says. "Won't solve everything, but it might help." He nods. "Appreciate it." She glances toward the reception desk, then back to him. There's a flicker of conflict in her face, the look of someone weighing whether to cross an unspoken line. "What happened in there?" she asks quietly. Miles studies her for a moment, considering how much to say. "Doctor decided I'd be better off somewhere else. Said I should go to the VA." Emily's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. "I'll see if I can talk to the department head," she says, the words quick, as if speaking them faster might get them past the invisible rules that govern these walls. "Thanks," Miles says, "but I'm not the first person this has happened to, and I won't be the last." His voice is steady, but there's a weight under it, the kind that makes you understand the statement isn't about just this morning or just this hospital. As he speaks, his fingers trace the edge of the folder in his lap. The clasp is worn, the cardboard softened from years of handling. Emily catches a glimpse inside, a set of documents neatly arranged, military service records, a folded letter of commendation, photographs of a platoon lined up in desert uniforms. Beneath those, an official-looking contract with a heading in bold, Miles Harper Foundation, Philanthropic Grant Agreement. Emily looks up, her brows drawing together. "That's your foundation?" she asks, surprised. He meets her eyes. "It was supposed to be anonymous." Something passes between them. Not quite a smile, not quite sorrow. A shared understanding that the morning's events have shifted, that whatever happens next will not stay confined to the waiting room. Emily straightens, glancing toward the far end of the lobby, where a pair of administrators in suits are deep in conversation. Her hand brushes the edge of the ice bag on the table, a small, wordless gesture of reassurance. Then she turns and walks away with purpose, the soles of her shoes tapping a steady rhythm against the tile. Miles watches her go, the weight of the folder still on his knees, the hum of the hospital returning to its usual blend of voices, footsteps, and overhead announcements. But somewhere under the noise, a current has started to shift. On the second floor of St. Andrew's Medical Center, behind a set of frosted glass doors marked Administration, the air feels different, quieter, more filtered, as if the bustle of the hospital floor below has been muffled. The carpet is thick enough to silence footsteps, and the walls are lined with framed photographs of ribbon-cutting ceremonies and smiling board members shaking hands. In a corner office, Harold Banks, the hospital administrator, sits at his desk in a crisp gray suit. The blinds behind him are half drawn, cutting the daylight into narrow slats across his desk. He's flipping through a stack of budget reports, lips moving slightly as he reads. The faint aroma of coffee drifting from a ceramic mug with the hospital logo. The door to his office opens without a knock, and Dr. Charles Rivers steps in. His coat is still perfectly pressed, but his jaw is tight. Harold looks up. "Charles, you look like you just walked out of a deposition. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Rivers replies quickly, though his voice is a shade too defensive. "But I've got a nurse telling me she's taking complaints about my patient interactions straight to you. I handled a walk-in this morning. Followed protocol. She seems to think I didn't." Harold sets down his pen and leans back. "Handled or dismissed?" Rivers bristles. "We're overbooked. The man didn't have an appointment. He was a veteran, said so himself. But the VA exists for exactly that reason. I redirected him appropriately. This isn't about medicine, Harold. It's about logistics." Harold's brow furrows. "We've been over this. Logistics don't excuse perception problems." "It's not perception, it's reality," Rivers says, folding his arms. "If we let every walk-in jump the line, the whole system collapses." Before Harold can respond, there's a soft knock on the doorframe. Emily, the nurse from the lobby, stands there with a clipboard. Her eyes are sharp now, her voice clipped but steady. "Mr. Banks, we have a situation. I believe one of our donors, possibly a major donor, was just refused care." Rivers exhales sharply. "Donor? He was sitting in my exam room 20 minutes ago." "Trust me, he's not—" Emily interrupts him without raising her voice. "His name is Miles Harper." The name hangs in the air for a moment. Harold's posture changes almost imperceptibly. The slow, subtle shift of a man who has just connected two pieces of information he wishes had stayed apart. "Miles. Harper," Harold repeats. He turns toward his desk, where a thick folder lies open under a paperweight. At the top of the visible page, Project Proposal. New Surgical Wing. Sponsored by the Miles Harper Foundation. Rivers notices the change in Harold's expression. "Wait, you know this guy?" Harold doesn't answer right away. Instead, he pulls the folder closer, scanning the figures. The projected donation amount, 7 digits long. His mind jumps ahead. The groundbreaking ceremony they'd planned for next quarter, the board press release already in draft form, the way this project would be the jewel of the hospital's next decade. "Not only do I know him," Harold says finally, his voice dropping, "he's one of the largest benefactors this hospital has ever had. If he walks away, the new surgical wing walks with him." Rivers blinks, the words landing like a slap. "That can't be right. He wasn't. He was," Harold says sharply. He pushes his chair back and stands, straightening his tie. "And you turned him away." Emily folds her arms, the faintest trace of satisfaction in her eyes. Not because she enjoys the fallout, but because the truth is now unavoidable. "He didn't want to make a scene," she says, "but I saw his file. Military service, commendations, foundation paperwork. He came in here for help, and we sent him packing." Harold grabs the folder and heads for the door. "Well, where is he now?" "In the lobby," Emily replies. Without another word, Harold strides past her, the door swinging shut behind him. Rivers hesitates a beat, then follows, his steps heavier, slower, as though each one costs him a little more than the last. The elevator doors part with a muted chime, and Harold Banks steps out onto the main floor, the folder under his arm like a shield he's suddenly afraid to need. The hum of the lobby greets him, phones ringing at the reception desk, the low murmur of conversation, the occasional squeak of rubber soles against tile. Behind him, Dr. Rivers follows, his pace slower, each step weighted with the realization that this moment may not be repairable. From across the room, Harold spots Miles in the far corner, still in the same chair he had taken after leaving the exam wing. The bag of ice Emily gave him has begun to melt, droplets of condensation pooling on the side table. His posture is straight, composed, but there's a quiet distance in his eyes, the kind that comes when someone has stopped expecting fairness and started measuring their options. Harold takes a breath straightens his tie, and starts toward him. The noise of the lobby seems to soften with every step, as if the whole room is leaning in to hear. Mr. Harper? Harold's voice is polite, warm, but carries an undercurrent of urgency. Miles looks up slowly, recognizing neither the man nor the tone immediately. Yes? I'm Harold Banks, the hospital administrator. Harold stops just short of intruding on Miles's personal space. I want to apologize for what happened earlier. I wasn't aware. Miles's gaze sharpens slightly, cutting through the carefully chosen words. You weren't aware of what? Harold clears his throat. That you... Were you? I mean, I didn't realize you were... A donor? Miles finishes for him, his voice even but edged. That's what it takes to be treated like a patient here? For a moment, Harold doesn't answer. Around them, the lobby continues its rhythm, the receptionist greeting someone else, a child's laugh echoing from the hallway. But the conversation at the corner seat is in its own suspended pocket of air. Behind Harold, Dr. Rivers arrives, his expression unreadable but his eyes restless, flicking between Miles and the floor. I may have been too quick to judge, he says, the words awkward in his mouth. Miles turns his head toward him, the look in his eyes steady and unblinking. You weren't quick to judge, he says. You were quick to decide. And you decided who I was before I said a word. The silence that follows is heavy, not loud, but filled with the weight of things neither man can take back. Emily stands off to the side now, watching, her expression carefully neutral, but her presence unmistakably protective. Harold shifts, the folder still under his arm. We'd like to make this right, he says. Miles sits back slightly, his fingers resting on the folder in his own lap, the one holding his service records, photographs, and the foundation documents. Making it right isn't about me walking out of here with a bandage and a thank you. If you think this is about one patient, you're already missing the point. Dr. Rivers's mouth opens as if to speak, then closes again. Harold, feeling the moment slipping, leans in just a fraction. Then, tell us what it would take. Miles studies them both for a long moment. His eyes are calm, but there's no mistaking the resolve in them. You have policies that can hide behind protocol and still treat people like they don't matter. That changes. You have a system that can turn pain into a waiting game based on the face in front of you. That changes too. And when it does, you won't have to worry whether I'm in the lobby or not. Harold glances sideways at Rivers, whose jaw has tightened but whose eyes have softened, the reality of the moment sinking in. Emily steps forward, breaking the pause. There's an open room for imaging right now, she says. If Mr. Harper agrees, we can start there. Miles looks at her, then back at Harold. We'll start with the conversation, he says. Then, we'll talk about the knee. For a moment, no one moves. Then Harold nods. Upstairs, he says quietly. Let's talk. As they turn toward the elevators, Rivers follows a step behind, his usual confident stride now subdued, his gaze fixed on the back of the man he had dismissed. And in the quiet between footsteps, he knows the conversation ahead may change more than just hospital policy. The conference room on the top floor was built for board meetings. Long walnut table, high-backed leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city skyline. In the late morning light, the buildings outside glinted like cold metal. Inside, the air was cooler still, the hum of the central ventilation the only sound as the group filed in. Miles took a seat near the center of the table, the sunlight falling across his left shoulder. Harold Banks sat opposite him, folder laid out in front of him like a confession. Dr. Rivers chose a chair off to the side, not quite at the table's edge, but far enough back to signal discomfort. Emily entered last, taking a spot beside Miles, setting her clipboard down as if to make it clear she wasn't here as silent staff. No one spoke at first. The quiet stretched, settling into the space like a weight. Miles broke it. I didn't plan on being here today, he began, his voice steady, deliberate. Not like this. I came because my knee's been giving me hell for weeks. Thought I'd get it checked before it became something worse. What I got instead was a reminder that no matter what you've done for this country, for this community, some people will decide your worth before you even sit down. Harold's hands folded on the table. Mr. Harper, I want to personally apologize for the way you were treated. It was unacceptable, and Miles cut him off with a slight raise of his hand. If you're apologizing because I'm a donor, save it. That's not the point. You've got good people here. I've met some of them. Emily's one of them. But you've also got a system that lets bias hide inside protocol. That's the part you have to face. Rivers shifted in his seat, eyes fixed on a point somewhere near the center of the table. I've been doing this a long time, he said quietly, and I tell myself it's about efficiency, about keeping the system moving. But the truth is, I didn't see you. Not really. I saw a walk-in, not a person. That's on me. Emily's gaze flicked toward him, unreadable. Seeing the patient is the job, she said simply. Miles leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. I've been funding a new surgical wing here because I believe access to care should mean something. But if that wing opens and nothing changes in how people are treated, then it's just a new set of walls around the same old problem. Harold's voice was quiet now, more measured. Then tell us what it would take to fix this. First, Miles said, you start a program I'm calling First Look. Any patient reporting pain severe enough to impact movement gets a primary evaluation within 30 minutes. Doesn't matter who they are, what insurance they have, or whether they booked an appointment. You look them in the eye, you hear them out, and you decide what's needed based on need, not convenience. He glanced at Rivers, holding his gaze for a moment. Second, you create a community advisory committee. People from the neighborhood, not just staff or board members. They'll review cases, policies, and complaints. And their recommendations carry weight, not just input. Emily added, and you hire a coordinator for equitable access, someone whose job is to track this, report it, and keep it from sliding back into business as usual. Harold tapped the edge of the folder, thinking, that's a lot to implement quickly. Miles didn't blink. You can build a surgical wing in a year. You can change the way people are treated in a day. It just depends on whether you want to. The room went still again. Outside the window, a plane crossed the skyline, its slow movement visible through the glass. Rivers finally spoke, his voice low but certain. I'll be the first to take the retraining. And not because I'm trying to save face, because I need to be the doctor I thought I was. Harold nodded once, more to himself than to anyone else. We'll draw up the commitments today, and we'll make them public. Miles leaned back slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing, though his expression stayed serious. Then maybe this morning will have been worth it. Emily's pen moved across her notepad, already turning words into steps. Harold closed the folder and set it aside, as though the decision had been made final. Rivers looked down at his hands, flexing them slightly, the way a man does when he realizes he's been holding them too still for too long. The conversation was over, but its echo would stay in this room and in the hospital, for far longer than the meeting itself. 6 months later, St. Andrew's Medical Center looked different. The lobby had been renovated, not just polished floors and fresh paint, but subtle changes that spoke of a shift in priorities. The check-in desk now had a discreet sign, First Look Program, primary evaluation within 30 minutes for all patients in pain. Below it, in smaller print, access is a right, not a privilege. Outside, on the east side of the hospital, a brand new glass and steel structure rose into the sky. On a clear autumn morning, a crowd had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. White folding chairs were lined up in neat rows, a small stage set against the gleaming new entrance. Banners fluttered in the cool breeze, their deep blue fabric embroidered with the hospital crest and the words, "The Harper Surgical Wing, dedicated to serving everyone." Miles stood near the podium, wearing a dark suit and a simple tie, his cane resting lightly against his side. His posture was straight, his expression calm, but his eyes moved constantly, taking in the new building, the people, the changes that had grown from one uncomfortable morning months earlier. The crowd included doctors in white coats, nurses in scrubs, hospital administrators, local officials, community members, and veterans in uniform. Emily stood among them, her hair pulled back, a faint smile on her face as she caught Miles's glance. A few rows away, Dr. Rivers sat with his hands folded, his gaze fixed on the stage. He looked leaner, a little older, but there was something in his posture, a quiet humility that hadn't been there before. The ceremony began with short speeches from the mayor and Harold Banks, who spoke about the partnership between community and care, and how the First Look program had already improved response times and patient satisfaction. He mentioned that the Community Advisory Committee had met 6 times in the last quarter, with recommendations already in effect. His tone carried the weight of someone who understood this wasn't just PR, it was survival. Then Harold stepped aside and gestured toward Miles. The applause swelled, not loud enough to be overwhelming, but warm, genuine. Miles stepped to the podium. He took a moment before speaking, scanning the faces in the crowd. When I first came to this hospital, he began, I didn't come as a donor. I came as a patient in pain. That morning, I didn't find the help I was looking for, but I did find the truth. The truth that even in places meant to heal, people can be overlooked, dismissed, or told to wait because of who they are, or who someone thinks they are. He paused, letting the words settle. The breeze caught the edge of the microphone cord, and somewhere in the crowd, a child laughed softly. I serve this country because I believe in the promise of equality, not just under the law, but in everyday life. In a hospital, equality isn't an abstract idea. It's whether the person in front of you gets help when they need it. It's whether pain gets attention without prejudice. That's why we built this wing. That's why we started First Look. So that the next person who walks in limping or clutching their chest or holding their side doesn't have to wonder if they matter. Emily nodded slightly, her eyes glistening. Rivers's hands tightened briefly, then relaxed. This building isn't my gift to the hospital, Miles continued. It's a promise, one you'll all keep, long after I'm gone. And it's proof that a bad morning doesn't have to end bad. Sometimes, if you face it head on, it can change the way an entire place sees the people it serves. The crowd rose in a standing ovation, the sound rolling across the plaza. Harold stepped forward with a large pair of ceremonial scissors, and Emily joined him, holding the ribbon steady. Miles gripped the handle alongside them. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts. The ribbon parted with a single clean cut. The doors to the Harper Wing swung open, revealing a bright, airy lobby with wide hallways, comfortable seating, and examination rooms ready for patients. Inside, a new intake station was marked with the First Look emblem, staffed by a nurse greeting the very first arrivals with a handshake and a smile. As people began to file inside for tours, Miles lingered at the entrance. He watched as a young man in work clothes, limping slightly, stepped hesitantly toward the desk. Without hesitation, the intake nurse stood, offered him a seat, and began the initial evaluation on the spot. No questions about appointments, no glance toward a clock. Just care. Miles exhaled slowly. In that single moment, he saw everything he'd hoped for, taking root. Emily passed by and touched his arm lightly. Looks like it's working, she said. He allowed himself the smallest of smiles. It's just the beginning. And as the autumn light spilled into the new wing, the story that had begun with a closed door found its ending, and its beginning, in one that would stay open for everyone.